welcome to Time Limit. Brett Harned here. Thanks so much for checking out the podcast. This episode is all about a specialization in the project management field that operates just a little differently than in a lot of other fields, and that's agency project management. I had the pleasure of connecting with Donna Sargeant, who's a program manager for Wunderman Thompson, which is a global digital agency headquartered in New York, but with 200 offices in 90 markets. So this conversation was a lot of fun for me because I worked for a long time in the agency world, and I know and have spoken a lot about the challenges of those roles. It was fun to dig in on everything from how to get an agency PM job all the way through to how you work out process with clients and everything in between. I think you'll enjoy this interview with Donna. Check it out. Donna Sargeant, thank you so much for joining me today on Time Limit. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to talk to you today about agency project management. It's something that you and I have in common, so I'm sure we're going to share some of the challenges we've faced in that realm, as well as some of the things that make the job fun.
Yes.
Because I do think it's a fun project management job, right?
It is. It is. It's my favorite, actually.
Cool. Me too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just like a different kind of environment. And I think we'll dig into that a little bit. I was wondering if maybe you could kind of start just by telling us a little bit about the types of projects that you work on. And maybe we should establish what I mean by an agency too. If you can talk about maybe that level of like your work setting, that might be cool.
Okay. So I currently work with Wunderman Thompson, and I love it. Agencies have My specific agency has very much a startup feel, even though it's a larger agency. We work to, like, my specific role and project right now is a digital project where we are helping our client with rebranding an entire website. So it is exciting that I'm working with so many different types of roles. I work with content strategists. I work with strategists in general. I work with the creative team. I work with a development team offshore. I work with the account supervisors as well as multiple other PMs, that project managers specifically, that kind of roll up into me as I'm the program manager over a large project. But I love the autonomy that I have to run that project, but also I have a network of people across the agency that I can tap into and ask questions as we're getting rolling on such a very large project. I really do. I love that that very quick and like fast pace of an agency and this kind of project. Have you had that same experience where agency work is kind of fast paced, but it's always really fun and involved? What's been your experience?
Oh, yes, for sure. So in my career, also in digital project management, I've worked in large agencies. So I worked for Razorfish,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked for a smaller agency called Happy Cog. That was my last project management job, all in digital, mostly in website design or redesign, highly creative, working with the same types of people as you. And I think the creative aspect is part of what makes it fun because
Yes.
there's a lot of research and discovery that you get to take part in and kind of shaping project goals, shaping scopes, contributing to creative at times when you're on the
Yes.
smaller team. Those are all the things that I really like about it. I'm curious.
Same.
You mentioned website branding.
Mm-hmm.
What other types of projects do you work on in the digital realm?
Well, in the digital realm, specifically for the program that I'm currently on, my development team is very much I'm very much in the weeds with the development team because there's so much to do. We're not only rebranding, but we're moving a website onto a new platform. So there's quite a bit of, AEM with like working with Adobe and working with a CRM and a CMS. So just to make sure that we're managing all the content and working with a very agile development team to make sure that my creative team is churning and my content strategists are creating content decks and comps and things of that nature and making sure that the sprint boards are full and the backlog's full for the team that's doing all the development. So there's a lot of that to balance as well.
I love it. So, one of the things that you're talking about is this kind of like balance, right? That a digital
Hmm.
PM has to take on because you're managing teams of specialists who are kind of like all working toward the same goals, of course,
Yes.
but they have very different specialties, right? Like you mentioned, content
Yes.
strategy. I'm sure there's UX,
Hmm.
development. Like those are different, not just different tasks, but also very different personalities that you're managing in
Yes.
those teams,
Yes. Very much so.
which can be a lot of fun, but also can be a really huge challenge. I
Yes.
personally, I love that you're laughing through this because you totally relate. So I personally, in this realm, have always kind of considered myself more of like the creative design and UX and content project manager, just because that's my background. And it sounds like you're really embedded in technical. Do you have a specialty on either side? And do you think it's important for someone in digital to specialize in an area within a digital project management?
So I think that it helps. I really do. I think that it helps when you have some sort of background in it. So it could be on the UX side where you know a little more about wireframes and you know a little bit more about, content structure and making sure that the flow and the taxonomy of the page makes sense and things of that nature. I think it definitely helps when you're having those kinds of conversations with your subject matter expert that you can understand what they're trying to convey to you.
Hmm.
My background has been more so on the software development side. And I've worked also before this role at a very small startup where I had to work like side by side with my designers and
Hmm.
doing mind mapping and things of that nature. So I had a little bit of both worlds before I came into this role. And I think that really helped because I knew how to ask certain questions of my tech team and, finding out whether or not, they needed more time on certain sprints and stories and how we were going to break things up versus working with my team and making sure that we're fleshing out the design and the ideas that may come to light for the client. So I think it helped to have a little bit of both. And my background, I think, leaned a little bit more towards the technical side.
Got it. Yeah, I agree with you. I always tell people that I know enough to make me dangerous, and you don't want me in your design files or in your code ever. And that's fair because I shouldn't be. That's
Yeah,
not my job, right?
exactly.
Um,
Right.
so you mentioned you're a program director at
Or
Wunderman
program
Thompson.
manager.
Program
Program
manager.
manager.
I'm sorry.
Hmm.
What does that mean? Can you kind of explain what the structure is and the level of kind of PM within Wunderman Thompson?
Sure. So currently there are right now there are associate project managers. That's the just breaking into project management.
Okay.
And then there are project managers, senior project managers, and then program managers. So, and then of course a program director. And then we have a group director.
Okay.
and,
Well, it's
and then
huge. I mean, Wunderman Thompson is a huge global
it
agency, right?
is. It's
Yeah.
huge. It really
Yeah.
is. So, and I mean, and I understand, and it's awesome because it's obvious that you can grow. That's
Right.
how I see it. I see it that it's awesome that I know that there's a trajectory. I can I can grow here and I can like learn so many different things. And because they have so many different projects, I can pivot if needed be. If they had a need, they always have a need. That's something I also love about Wunderman Thompson. There's always a need for a PM or someone to come in and tap in and help. So but the process like on my current account I have a technical project manager that's over the technical team abroad. And then I have a project manager who works with me on this very large project,
Okay.
because there's so many different levels to it. So a project manager may be in the day-to-day, making sure that the naming structure and the nomenclature that we're following for our filing system, because there's so many content decks, because there's so many pages are being managed, and we have a clean handoff process. If someone's outside of that process, we tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, let's make sure that we're operating within this, because there's so many different things to track that we need it to be a smooth thing. And I handle things somewhat at a little higher of a level with regard to resource management, scope management, making sure that the expectation with the client is set. And I'm working side by side with my account supervisor to make sure that she understands exactly what's happening on the project side, on the actual development side and creative side. So there's a lot of coordination and collaboration to make sure that we're smoothly moving towards the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we have different people at different levels to help ensure that happens.
I really like that. One of the things that project managers or people who are trying to get into project management will reach out to me and ask is, what can I do? How can I get my
Right.
first job? And there are so many organizations that are, and agencies specifically, that are small, boutique size
Yeah.
agencies that are flat, that require more senior level project management because they don't have as much of a growth path. So I
Right.
think, to me, like, pointing those people in the direction of larger agencies is a great way to not only break into project management, but also to get a crash course on how to be a good agency PM. I'm
Yes.
curious, how did you get into it?
So I I did a lot of applying at one point. After being at a startup, I learned quite a bit,
Mhm.
because at a startup you have to wear many hats. And I was looking for a role in which I could, one, grow. You could see that growth, and you can understand that there are different levels, and learn more, because this is my first agency role. Um, and like I mentioned before, I had the background in both technology, and I could very much speak to a product owner and a CX, and I mean a UX person, and things like
Right.
that, just to talk through the experience. And I think that is what won them over. I could have that vernacular back and forth with my technical team, but also know how to work with a creative team, because working with, like you mentioned, creative teams are very different than that of your technology team, and back end engineers or full stack engineers. It's completely different. And to be able to pivot to talk to either and be able to talk to a client was something that they were looking for. So that's how they reached out to me, and I got involved. I actually saw the role and reached out to someone on LinkedIn, one
That's
of the
cool.
HR, and they reached right back out to me.
That's great.
Mhm.
Having that
Yeah.
network is awesome when when
Yeah.
you're looking for
Yes.
something new. But it's also, I do want to say, just for folks out there who are looking for ways to break into project management, I think digital is a great
Yes.
area because,
Yes.
obviously it's not going anywhere. It can be
Hmm.
done remotely really well,
Yes.
and easily. Um, and it's a good way to just break into an industry that is fun and creative, where you get the opportunity to make mistakes and
Yep.
recover from those mistakes without,
Yes.
like, destroying your career in most cases,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Because I mean, mistakes are going to happen. I feel like PMs don't love that, but it's true. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to scope creep is going to happen. And you have to be able to manage that, and have that conversation, or even have that relationship. With your account soup and the client, to make sure that you can communicate what's going on, and how that's a little bit outside of the scope, and things of that nature. You learn so much
Right.
at an agency. It's a wealth of knowledge, and it really is the
Absolutely.
awesome place to start.
So you mentioned account management, and I want to dig in on that a little bit because in my experience in a large agency, I was basically working for one client. It was a pharmaceutical company, probably like 20 plus projects happening at one time between web development, SEO, banner ads, all of that kind of stuff. And that was a lot to coordinate for one person. And there was an account team that had 5 people. And to me, this was the biggest challenge that I experienced as a project manager in an agency. It was the imbalance of account management and project management, and how account management would commit the team to things that project management would never commit to because account management wasn't necessarily educated enough on process or estimating and scopes and would commit to things and it would drive me crazy. So, can you, I don't know if you've had that experience, I'm sensing possibly, but could you
Yeah.
maybe like share a little bit about like how it works in your agency when it comes to account management and project management, how you collaborate and what the overlap might be?
So, yes. So here at an agency, I'm glad you mentioned it. At an agency, um, it's very different from a strictly software development or um, just any other role I've ever had. I've always been both. I've always been the account management where I'm the one talking to the client and the project manager at the same time with the team.
Hmm.
But in agencies, the strategist and the account managers are the ones who are kind of organizing the scope of what you're going to deliver. And there is, just like you mentioned, sometimes a disconnect. I'm very happy to say I love my manager, and she is very much a um, she's driven and assertive. So she will make sure that she's already made sure that that project management, specifically at her level, is inside of those meetings. So, because we need to understand from a resourcing standpoint, that's how we've driven ourselves into the process.
Hmm.
But from a resource process point of view, we need to understand what's being delivered so that we can make sure we have the resources to support it. So that's how we've made sure that we're in the room and part of that process so that the disconnect won't be so large. so,
Right.
so we've definitely had those experiences and we've learned from them. So those lessons learned have led to us being a part of that process so that we don't have those situations anymore. So that we're not promising things we cannot deliver. I completely understand what you mean.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I mean, I think it's a learning process, right?
Yes.
And anytime you join a new team in a role like this, it will always be a learning process, and you have to be open to changing and adapting to meet the needs of the project, the team that you're working with, the scope, your stakeholders. There's so much you have to think about. But another thing I want to mention is when you're working in a smaller agency, like more of a boutique size agency,
Right.
you often tend to have to take on those account management and project management responsibilities in one, which
Yeah.
can be difficult. I personally really enjoy that because
Mhm.
I think it's important for a PM to have a seat at the table when there's
Yes.
any conversation regarding any project or program details. And
Right.
sometimes when the team is bigger and there are more roles, there are less seats at the table and the PM gets kicked to the back.
Right.
So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's there is a difference in the way that you can PM at an agency, just depending on the company you're working for. But,
Absolutely. Hmm.
there are lots of challenges that digital project managers, agency project managers face. I'm wondering what other challenges do you tend to face in your day to day?
I think one of them is the management of expectation. I am very adamant about making sure that the expectation is clear. So my expectations of my team, whether it be through hot sheets or I have biweekly meetings with the entire team
Hmm.
to make sure that we are tracking and that everyone understands at the top of the week what my expectations are, and they can communicate to me. Is this too much? Can you not quite handle this? Are you being pulled in another direction because of another project? Like, talk to me and make sure that we're all under the same understanding of what we're going to deliver for even just this week or this sprint. And that's across teams. That's for creative. That's for my tech team. I would like people to just make sure they're communicating with me. And then, of course, with my account soup, I make sure that if when in meetings with the client, if they're saying something that doesn't quite sound like the expectation that we've originally set, being the challenge I found is making sure that they are aware of the scope, and when something grows outside of that scope, without being annoying about it. You want to make sure you have a great relationship with your client. I like having a great relationship with the client, or a comfortable one, so that you can talk to them about, okay, well, we're tracking, because I like to bring up what we talked about in the kickoff around, like, this is what we're delivering. And when things kind of grow outside of that, how we make sure they understand that this is more than the scope. And like,
Right.
are we going to now talk about a extension, or how would you like to manage this extra piece of scope? How would you like to, add this to the current scope? Will something
Absolutely.
shift? Those kinds of things I find to be challenging, but to make sure that everyone is under the same understanding impression at the same time is something that is challenging, I think.
Absolutely. It's challenging to build relationships when there's a little bit of a barrier between you and the client, if that
Right.
ever exists. But I
Yes.
think the point that you're making is so clear. It's just that when you do make the time to build those relationships and focus on the people, sometimes delivering the bad news is just a little bit easier
Yes.
because you've got a rapport and you've got a mutual understanding and the expectations are just set. It just makes
Right.
things easier.
It
I'm
does.
I'm curious, how do you kick off projects?
So in an agency, I've learned it's it's quite different, because you get a brief. So you will receive a brief from the client, and they will explain to you what they're wanting to deliver or convey. The strategy team will then take that, grow upon it, and then present that brief back to the client to make sure that they understand and that they are signing off on the new creative direction. That brief will then be given to the entire team, the creative team specifically. And I will then take that information and make sure that everyone has it. So, as a program manager, I'll make sure that I'll do a quick kickoff meeting where I'm talking about, like, this is the scope, this is what we're working toward. The strategy team will do a complete share out of what the client is looking for. And then I'll also make sure that everyone on the team understands, here are our key players. Here are the stakeholders, the decision makers on the project. Um, you know, this is how you're going to be, putting in your time across our time management system. Here are our cadences. We're going to have meetings on the state, so that we're tracking towards it. And then I also make sure that when I create a project plan, we're going to walk through the project plan together. Let me know if this is too aggressive. This is how I see us hitting the date. Let me know whether or not we need to shift things, and like, I'll bring those things up as we move along the project. But
Great.
that's how I kind of kick off a project within an agency. It first starts with the client and then the strategy team.
Yeah,
Has
so it
it been
sounds
that
like
way for
you're
you?
yeah, I mean, so I talk about kickoffs in multiple ways at agencies because I think what you're talking about is kind of like an internal kickoff where you kind of need to make sure that everyone involved in the project internally is aligned on the scope, the goals, the timeline, and all those constraints that come along with it. And also doing a little bit of team building and making everyone kind of comfortable
Right.
with the team atmosphere.
Yeah.
Then I think I've done client kickoffs in a couple of
Mm.
different ways, but the most kind of effective and my most favorite way to kick off meetings is after doing some research and discovery work, if that's called for in a project, gathering the entire team as well as the entire stakeholder team
Hmm.
for like a day or a half day of sessions. to dig in further on things like goals, talking about kind of differences that might have come up in stakeholder interviews, and really zeroing in on what the thing is that we're building is most important. Because I think that's the most confusing thing about digital projects is your team might be assigned to a project. They come into it. There's already an established scope and estimates, and probably like an understanding of how you'll get there. But you all are a little uneasy about it because what you're building is reliant on this kind of flexible creative process, and whatever the designer makes then has to be built, and what they make needs to kind of stay within a scope so that the project can be profitable. So it's this like tricky game of
Yes.
like cat and mouse, right? Like,
Yes.
it can be really tough. So that's just kind of how I've handled projects. But I would love to talk a little bit about process, like getting into actually how you're delivering projects. And I know that you mentioned Agile. So I'm curious if you could kind of talk to me a little bit about what Agile methods you're using and how that's working in delivery.
Okay. We are definitely using Agile, and we, as a team, both internally and externally with our clients, do PI planning, where we come together as a team to talk about the different things that each group will be managing, because there's quite a few projects. My specific project, because there are there are three program managers on this
Okay.
one client.
Mm-hmm. That's big.
And yeah, it's large. It's very large. And we have, CRM is managed by one program manager, and updates and maintenance things are handled by one program manager, and I handle the rebranding and the revamp and migration.
Okay.
So there's so many different individuals who have different needs, and this entire group, this entire team as a whole manages this one client. So there's a lot of resource balancing.
Sure.
Um, so when we have a PI planning, we all come together to talk about the interdependencies and the timelines together so that we can plan a few months at a time. So we'll plan a quarter at a time and the different objectives that we want to deliver. So we'll have a release train manager who'll just be managing that. That's the goal that we're all kind of working towards, to make the entire team more agile. Right now, but the creative team isn't as agile as obviously our development team, but we're
Right.
moving toward making sure that everyone is aligned so that even our clients have more visibility into the interdependencies, because they see it as they have one flowing need, they have one journey that they need completed, but they don't have insight into, if they ask for something very quickly at a moment's notice, what that affects.
Right.
So making sure that they have insight into that, and there's transparency, open transparency about all the different projects and all the different moving pieces, gives them more of an opportunity to make informed decisions. Because otherwise, it's just us telling them, well, this is going to change this. But if you at a PI meeting where we're talking about the different things that we need to deliver, they have visibility into the moving pieces. So we do, a lot of the ceremonies. We have a daily stand up with the client. We have retrospectives and lessons learned at the end of a full project. So those are some of the things that we do. Grooming. We do,
Okay.
backlog grooming as well, but sprint planning. We do quite a few of the ceremonies on the technical side specifically, and we'll make sure that we're pulling in our UX and creative team to be a part of those meetings so that they have visibility before when it goes to a QA. It needs to make sure it goes through both a technical functional QA as well as a creative review QA before it gets to
Definitely.
the client and UAT. So there's a lot of things to manage with with this large agile
It's a
team,
lot of
but I love
process. So
it.
it sounds like you're basically managing kind of like a hybrid process where,
Right.
and I imagine that it's because design is so open to feedback and rounds of
Yes.
revisions with clients that
Yes.
that almost has to stay that way. Like it's hard to work in sprints with design, I think, with a paying client.
Yes.
But it makes sense that your sprints and more agile work would happen in development. That's how I've worked as well. I typically
Yes.
call that like a hybrid process.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And then it sounds like you're also managing a level of kind of like support and maintenance and working that into resourcing while you're trying to achieve all those goals on projects. So sounds
Yes.
about right in agencies. It's always fast paced. Everyone's always way too busy and a little bit stressed out, but
Yeah.
somehow it's still fun. So I want to talk about
So
like
fun.
the individual level as a PM. How do you connect with other PMs within your agency? Like one of the things I remember was I was on this big team of project managers, but I still felt like an island because I was the one PM on the account. And I wanted more insight into how other people were managing that and working. How are you doing that?
So they very recently heard that exact same feedback from the PMs. So they're working on it currently. So what we have is a group. Remember, I mentioned above my director, over all the PMs and the program managers, and on my specific account, there's a group director. So that group director is over all of the PMs. And they report to all the PMs in the Wunderman Thompson agency. And they've asked for a meeting. So we have a weekly meeting where we get to talk about, some of the things that we are working on, some of the challenges, et cetera, or if we have a need and we need a new creative person, and we have a resource meeting for that, but just to talk amongst PMs because
Mhm.
our concerns and needs are a bit specific to
Right,
our
right.
industry. So we have a moment for that. And then those meetings, while we can be on an island by ourselves, it's a little difficult to relate to exactly what that person's going through. So they do have a share out where we share exactly what we are going through, but they'll invite a guest to that meeting and they'll talk about mural. I'm not sure if you use that.
I have. Mhm.
Yep, awesome. So like to show how different teams are using a specific tool, or they'll talk through if something went wrong, this is how we should use a war room technique. Just to also bring back actual usable
Yeah, sharing
techniques.
practices, giving
Yes,
people
exactly.
guidance. That makes
So it's
sense.
helpful. So we're working on a perfect, you know, um, recipe for it.
Mhm.
But it's awesome to be able to get with every other PM and kind of hear what everyone's going through, as well as learn some new tricks along the way. So I think they're still perfecting that, but I love the fact that we definitely heard the exact same feedback. It's like, what's happening with the other PMs? Like I don't even see them. I don't know what they do. So we
Yeah.
all get together and talk. Mhm.
I think those meetings give you an opportunity to learn and grow, not just as individuals, but like as a team and as an organization too. So it's good to hear that you're doing that. So we've been talking for a while already. I already want to
Oh.
schedule a follow-up to this. So we'll talk about that later. But on the podcast, my last question is always keeping in theme with the title of the show, which, as you know, is time limit. So we've already mentioned it. I'm sure you're always busy and probably even overwhelmed at times. And I'm wondering if there are any things that you have to do on a daily or weekly basis, no matter what, and how you make time for those things.
So specifically to, I definitely do because I do quite a bit at work, and then I also have home life and quite a few things that I do on the side. So what I tend to have to do, no matter what, every single day, is to make my to do list. Like I know, and I look at my to do list. I start it in the very morning, top of the day, and I write down all the things that I need to do, but I also prioritize it. If you don't make the priority around what are the things that have to get done, because your day will start and there'll be new priorities within an hour. So you need to know what things you absolutely have to focus on at the top of your day, if possible, or in the gaps within your day. They have to be managed. And at the end of the day, I make sure that I look at this list, check off what's been completed, and adjust. Finish some quick things. See what do I have some quick wins before the end of the night. That's how I manage all of the things that are going
Yeah.
on, because it's just the best way for me. It's one of my productivity
So
techniques.
helpful. That's awesome. The to-do list is needed.
Have to.
Donna, thank you so much for joining me on Time Limit. Really appreciate you having you here, and I hope we get to do this again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.
Thanks. Okay, I have to admit, we cut that interview a little short. Donna's last point about to-do lists was totally on point, and I know we could have kept going for a long time. What do you think? Would you listen to more? If there's a topic you want me to cover on Time Limit, or if you want to suggest or even be a guest, please reach out. These conversations are so much fun for me and hopefully helpful and entertaining for you. At least that's the point. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.